is, where, why. You might be wondering why we have is and where selectors in CSS when they both seem to do the same thing. Well, there is a difference, and we're going to have a look at it today after having a look at how the both of them work. So let's get started by having a look at what we would normally do in CSS when we want to select multiple elements but within the same parent. So we would come along and we would say container h1, then we'd comma separate it, and we'd say container h2, and we'd comma separate it, and we'd say container paragraph, and then we'd comma separate it with anything we need, and we'd list them off like so. And then we can drop in whatever we need to change. So color red, font Arial, and that seems really not too bad. But imagine we had to do this with lots of different things, and we needed to use loads of these, and we were just repeating this quite a bit. Dot container, dot container, dot container. Well, we can now actually simplify this using is or where, and I'm going to start with the example of the is selector. And what we do is we simply say is, and we can skip this part by saying is h1, h2, paragraph, and these will still work. And similarly, we can do this with where. We say h1, h2, paragraph. I'm just going to comment this out, and then say color blue in this scenario, and font family can be Helvetica. And you see, we now have this exactly as we would expect, but instead of having to repeat the dot container and have multiple lines, we just have this one clean line, and we just say where, and we list off the items within it that we want to control. Now you're probably thinking, didn't they just do the same thing? Why do we have both? Well, yes, they did do the same thing, but there's a difference between them, and let's have a look at that now. So with our where selector, we could change this, and instead of selecting the h1, we could select it by its ID, and we still get the same result, but I can come along and I can say container paragraph, and just select the paragraph on its own and say color yellow, maybe not yellow because we can't read it, set the color back to black, and we can change the font size to 12 pixels, and we can override the styles that we set up here. Now you'll find, however, if I remove this and we go back to the is selector, and again we replace the h1 with a heading ID instead, and you notice we get a different output. This time we've gone with the is, but we can't override it. The reason for this is because when we use is, we are adding specificity, and the specificity that we are adding is controlled by the highest specificity item on our list that we've put here. And of course an ID has a high specificity, so everything in here now has that specificity. Whereas down here we haven't added any specificity, it just treats each as it should be treated individually. But with the is, we have to consider the specificity of what we're putting in, and we have to be careful. But just so you know, that's how you use is, that's how you use where. Almost identical, but not quite.